Evet. Evet. I hope everybody can see what I am demonstrating to you.
You can see.
Okay, thank you. As I told you, I made an introduction to establish a background. I explained the term Baroque, its emergence in relation to the Council of Trent, Catholic Counter-Reformation. This emergence cannot be directly, of course, related to Counter-Reformation or any other religious issue, but these developments had a profound influence upon the development of Baroque. Could you please mute all of the participants, Orçun?
Tabii hocam, bir saniye.
Thank you. Since sponsors, patrons of art and architecture, mostly popes, who were most influential in 17th and even earlier 16th century Italy, then their involvement had a great influence upon development of art and architecture. Their predilections, their choices, of course, led designers to offer projects, works in tune with expectations. Then we have really a new window opened to art and architecture by means of developments, political and religious, in the end of the 16th century and all throughout of the 17th century. It reached at a stage where Catholicism, specifically Roman Catholicism, were spreading to the world, to Americas, I mean South America, Middle America mostly, to the colonies elsewhere. In a way, this tradition promoted spread of this religion. Even we can say that reached to the level of representative of the ideologies of the church. Maybe this did not exist initially, but in time, Roman Catholicism and Baroque art, in a way, associated profoundly, more firmly than before. This we can say. In time, even this kind of a association created a negative stance among secular enlightened cycles after the 18th century. This is the reason when, after the French Revolution, neoclassicism, in a way promoted by the politicians and rulers of the 19th century Europe, in a way reacted to the art of Baroque of the 17th century. But this had a negative impact upon the perception of Baroque, since it's placed a cover upon Baroque art and prevented for decades understanding of its contributions to art history. Later in the 20th century, scholarship developed and more publications, books and papers introduced, researchers done, in a way proved that Baroque, apart from its religious sense or any other propagandist approach or use of it by the church, in itself had a great creative power. This understood in 20th century scholarship, and now we really appreciate Baroque artists and architects, not as propagandists of an idea or an ideology, as creative persona who in a way managed to in a way to express drama, to express tragedy, to express any other, dense, sentimental, issue in the topics they dealt with, the teams, art teams, architectural teams, even they dealt with in a very successful manner. Okay, this is an introduction to today's topic. Actually, there is a brief definition what I have been telling to you. The Catholic Church was a leading art patron across much of Europe. The goal of much art in the Counter-Reformation, especially in the Rome of Bernini and the Flanders of Peter Paul Rubens, was to restore Catholicism's predominance and centrality. This was one of the drivers of the Baroque style that emerged across Europe in the late 16th century, in areas where Catholicism predominated, architecture and painting, and to a lesser extent, music reflected Counter-Reformation goals. Okay. 17th century Baroque music is well known with its religious themes. I would like to remind you, for example, Bach, St. Matthew, and other compositions he credited, St. John and St. Matthew primarily, totally based on religious themes. 17th century really is an age when religious orientation, religious, how can I say, backgrounds had a great impact upon the works of art, architecture, and music. And also urban planning in this century, sorry, developed by pops in order to create appropriate circulation in the city, web approach in relation to the main avenues, in a way, created and restored by the pops that led and today leads to great church of the city. These are the churches. And this slide gives us them with their names and pictures. This is a reminder of the last week. Now I would like to go with Baroque architecture today. I put these slides just in a few minutes before. I mean, I was looking for slides to represent you the change, or it's better to say gradual change in Baroque architecture. And I would like to illustrate earlier Romanesque medieval architecture in Italy. Pisa Cathedral is the best among others to illustrate this age. Earlier Gothic and Romanesque, but actually Gothic did not reach to Italy. Italy totally rejected Gothic, regarded it as the art and architecture of the Northerns. I mean, the people in the North, Goths. Even the term Gothic given by the Italian intellectuals as a belittling terminology. Then really, except maybe Milana, Cathedral in Milan, we don't have Gothic buildings to be valued in the same level with the French examples. Then from medieval age, I could select Pisa Cathedral with its facade. As you can see, rounded arch, this monotonous display of blind arcades. Actually, arcades. There are arcades, really arcades, ornamental in the facades, in rows, as you can see. There's a rigidity, and there is a geometry based upon a rough understanding of proportions in relation to the elements. There is no deliberate attempt to relate different levels. As you can see, the first level is so high, and unrelated to the ones at the top. And there is no relationship provided between those different levels. I mean, for example, a diminishing scale of the arcades would lead to the top, or on the contrary. And there are no connecting elements, as you can see, between the different levels, like these volutes on the right. You can see everything is so fragmented, separate, and individual, and even unproportioned at a level, which, you know, makes these monuments an archaic phase of later developments. In the Renaissance, the contribution of Alberti, as I explained to you before, is to introduce volutes. This was an old church existing in the sides. Alberti introduced a facade there, renovated the facades, and almost created a style of its own in adding these volutes right and left in order to connect this central projecting body of the nave with the pediment, as you can see, and the side aisles, as you can see, the side aisles here on the left and on the right, and at the center we have a nave. We can see this reflected in this projection. There is a problem to connect these two dimensions. On the left, here we have a solution introduced by means of a broken pediment. At the top, we have a pediment, and another pediment introduces the kind of connection, interrelation between the lower and upper zones, upper zone and lower zone, altogether in a way rendered part of a composition by means of these ornamental pediments, specifically the one here. Instead of this rigid angled, you know, triangular, connecting element, instantly Alberti decided to introduce a volute here, a softer, rounded facade, facade element with a roundel, a kind of rosetta, a roundel at the middle, right and left. You can see these roundels repeat the rose window of the center. This is a element borrowed from Baroque, Gothic architecture. A Gothic rose window, in a way balanced with these roundels, right and left at the top, introducing this element of the circle, and also even an irregular form, this volute, the oval of this volute, undulating form of it, is an initiator of later Baroque developments, though we are in Renaissance. This is an experience by the architect to introduce integration, to introduce interrelated elements in the facade of this building. Even when you look at this organization of the arch and blind arcades, and compartmentalization by means of these horizontal and rectangular devices, as you can see in the ornamentation, Alberti would like to break the uniformity of the pieces of the first stage in a way to introduce stages of development by means of these levels, one above the others. It is not as successful as later Renaissance examples, but as an initiator of a new age, when we have a facade now based upon the understanding of segments developing at stages. This is named concatenation in English. Concatenation, gradation, concatenation are the terms employed, you know, in degrees. You go up at the vertical axis, you go up, you see. Integration is to introduce a kind of umbrella concept by means of course, architectural elements, to take them inside, to bring them into a harmonious whole. Integration and concatenation are fools, actually. They're enemies. I mean, because it is almost impossible to integrate a piece, I mean, of artwork where we also have segments, segments, levels, stages, differentiation. Very, very difficult task. Very, very difficult task. But Renaissance architects aim to do that, aim to integrate a graded, a concatenated, canvas. This is like a canvas of a painter, the facade. According to scholars of Renaissance, they couldn't manage this. And this is the reason why Baroque appeared with all its plasticity, which is a confession of unsuccessful attempts to integrate divisions in the facade. This is an idea by Kaufmann, Emil Kaufmann, as I told you before. Another point here is that we have a basilica at the background, and basilica is an oblong building, a rectangular oblong building extending on east-west axis, totally separate from the facade, since the volume of a rectangle at the background contradicts with the how can I say? Let me tell you that the sides are unequal. There are not equal sides. Then uniformity of the sides is not possible, since on the right and left, and in north and south, in a basilica, you should organize a rectangular facade. The longer side is horizontal, rectangular and horizontal, and the east and west again rectangular but vertical. And also the problem is with the nave. Nave projects at the center. But in a domed building like Hagia Sophia or Süleymaniye, you can organize the facades after almost equal sized, proportions. And in relation to the dome, you can introduce hierarchy. You can introduce integration underneath the umbrella of the dome. This is the reason why Mimar Sinan preferred dome, and later in Renaissance we would also see great domed buildings in which this kind of a ideal proportional system or concept even could be realized. Concatenation, gradation, and integration altogether would be more possible. But unfortunately, churchmen still in the late Renaissance and in Baroque asking continuously basilicas to be formed. I illustrated this how from the design of Michelangelo to Maderno, the building of St. Peter's in Rome changed after these demands by the churchmen who were looking, for a great oblong basilica, which spoiled the design of Michelangelo. Even Bramante initially would like to build a centralized building. In a centralized building, the elements could be organized in relation to each other in a more appropriate manner. But in an oblong basilica, it's not possible. Let's forget about in a basilica to, for example, relate inner structural system with the facade elements, which was realized by architect Sinan. Then the involvement of the churchmen, involvement of the church actually, church itself is churchmen, in a way prevented the successful crowning of the development in church architecture. This is a reality. Anyway, there are attempts by Renaissance architects in order to introduce this integrity, and Alberti is a good case in this development, a step leading to later examples. Chiesa Novana in Rome again. The facade was redesigned by Lucchesi in 1606. Alberti's volutes right and left, still are there. But when you look at this facade, you understand that it is in the tradition of early Renaissance, with its projecting central piece, as you can see. But this projection is now different, as you can see. It is wider on north and south, you see, wider. And these volutes are not as big as in Alberti's, because now this distance is smaller between the projection of the nave and the corners of the naves, right and left. You see this distance, it is now shorter here, and volutes are smaller. Why? As I told you, architects from Renaissance onwards would like to relate the elements in a more successful way and reach to a concept of integrity. This is the reason why we have now this facade, organized like facade of a palazzo, which is normal a facade of a typical basilica with a projecting nave and aisles. But this is not a how can I say, principle, to be followed by other architects. This is a one-time experience in which we have the central projection almost entirely rendered a part of the entire design, and this division between the lower nave and aisle substructure and the upper zone is eliminated. This is not a general approach and experience by Borghese. When you look at the background, we still have a great basilica with aisles and central nave. You can see, but the typical proportions of the Renaissance, for example, interrelationship between those elements, I mean cubic elements underneath these walls, and the transepts, for example, quartering of the transept dome would give you one, unit in the aisles like this and that and that. But introduction of this great niche here, a chapel with a great arch, spoils this concept of a side unit in direct relationship with the transept section. Then proportions are changing. But the one advantage of this, kind of a great arch here is to in a way to create an embracing aisle around the nave, rounded embracing aisle around the nave. This is a Baroque tendency, and you should also care this sculpture. You see the angels above the apse niche and the cornices leading to the top. Sculpture employed in order to relate different stages of the architectural elements. I mean, in a way, to introduce integration between domed upper and vaulted lower structural systems. Now back to Alberti, as I told you, this is not a rule now. Back to Alberti, we have great volutes. There's Jesuit, this is a Jesuit church, Il Gesù, in Rome, Jesuits who were sent all over Christian, Roman Christian, Orthodox, Catholic Christian world to convert locals. And this was their central church with the monastery at the back. Il Gesù by Jacopo Vignola, end of 16th century, just the beginning of Baroque. Still we have Renaissance lucidity, it is a calm facade, with the volutes, Alberti's elements. You can see that it is almost modeled upon understanding developed by Alberti, though we have more protruding elements in the decoration. These pilasters, attached columns, now turn out to be self-standing, great architectural, structural elements even. This plasticity, I mean, non-functional elements standing like sculpture or sculpturesque entities altogether display a new tendency. Now there are shadows, and these shadows created by protrusions altogether, which create a more dramatic impact upon the viewer, as you can see from this white, how can I say, even one dimensional facade from this sheet-like facade. Now we come to a kind of facade which is richer in terms of the perspective created in the relationship between the elements at the front and background. In this tendency, the wall is becoming more and more illuminated. Wall is now receding at the background and getting there, receding. It is, disappearing in the background. But this is a process. This is a process that would be witnessed in the development of Baroque. When we look at interior, you would see great ornamentational style, but which is not bad. This is not as heavy as we would find in later Baroque interiors. But still the idea is the same with the facade, to create a kind of curtain, a kind of sheet-like curtain pattern in front of the wall. This curtain pattern is not created by structural elements only. There are structural elements, but these structural elements hidden by ornamentational devices like these pilasters, column capitals. You don't see the structural organization in this church hidden by ornamentational devices, but ornamentational devices themselves are expressed appropriately with all their character. This is typically Baroque. No hint of structural organization, entirely covered by decorative program, but this decorative program itself in relation to the structural system, because these are pilasters, or these are pilasters in relation to the supporting system based upon post and lintel organization. Then this is a very interesting point to make. Then we can say that this plasticity is a sort of exaggerated structural system. Still, what I mean is that still in relation to architectural elements. You cannot say that Baroque decorative program is entirely disassociated from architecture itself. This is not possible. Probably up to modern age, 20th century, ornamentation and architecture worked hand in hand. Decorators and architects, designers of the interior, and even other elements on the walls outside, worked with the structural designers, architects, or architects themselves. In a way, we know this, they did it, were very active in decoration and in the design of the structural system. These were not separated until the end of the 19th century. Santa Susanna Church, Carlo Moderno, again an experience with a more integrated facades, volutes, a great central projection of the nave, inconspicuous aisle zone, though aisles probably start from somewhere here inside, but they are in a way hidden in the background of this section, except the volutes, you don't get an understanding of the side elements inside aisles, I mean. Anyway, what I mean is that we have a different concept here. Now this has gone. This has gone. This has gone. This fragmentation, not totally, but partially gone. And here we have still a neo aisles, but their connection to each other, augmentation of the central projection, and interrelationships provided by stages, you see, altogether. These elements in relation to each other. At the first stage, we have more protruding, rounded pilasters, but at the second stage, we have angled, as you can see, pilasters. There is an asymmetry from this perspective, but also symmetry and continuation since they are at the same axis, you see. These are placed, introduced by designers, which we also find in architect Sinan's designs, because sometimes asymmetry in symmetry, not sometimes, usually, this is a principle almost. Asymmetry in symmetry is more pleasing to the eye since it breaks the monotony that is always there in a symmetrical composition. There is a potential, to concentrate at the different points. You focus upon this, you focus upon that, and you also understand them in togetherness. This is introduced by display with symmetry and asymmetry. Asymmetry in symmetry introduces us with this kind of an understanding and aesthetic enjoyment, one can say so, when we make an analysis of these facets. There is really an effort, yani emek we say in Turkish. I couldn't find the proper word for this, emek. An effort, a kind of a sacrifice by the designer. He aimed to do something, he spent time and effort to design. Master craftsmen also, workers also, and credit these great facets, I mean. And really, these works need to be appreciated, analyzed in detail, understood, be understood in a way, because today this handcraft is almost totally lost, and nobody now, introduce such plaster made by hand. Masonry techniques entirely changed, and really they are more valuable today than before. I can say so, these historical works, and we should really care them. And this care spent to the works of past is the guarantee of the care to be spent to the works of today in the future. I mean, if we don't evaluate and appreciate the works of the past, we shouldn't expect others pay the same respect to our works we create today. Yeah, this is the fact, and this is the reason we offer these architectural history courses to evaluate, to introduce values to the architecture of today and the future, and expect new generations to appreciate them and to put them in the history of humankind. I mean, otherwise, without architectural history courses, nobody would care them. Since we produce knowledge, and with this knowledge, those monuments become more meaningful. And even with this knowledge, we appreciate them. We take aesthetic pleasure from them. An art historian, an art critic sometimes, makes me aware in pointing out some details in a monument that I have never thought about, I discovered it, okay, yeah, he is right, or she's right. There is this detail which makes this different. I mean, then I should care this, and I should think about this. And we help each other. My students sometimes help me when I visit monuments. I help them, to understand details. And this is the accumulation of knowledge based upon experience, which enhances our aesthetic appreciation. Then aesthetic appreciation is also based upon knowledge. Don't forget this. on knowledge. With knowledge, we appreciate. Without knowledge, there, just that is, what is that? Anyway, Santi Vincenzo and Anastasio Trevi, Martino Longhi the Younger is the designer, middle of the 17th century. Now, middle of the 17th century, bakın, middle of the 17th century. We are in the beginning of the 17th century, end of the 16th century, the end of the 16th century. Now we are in the middle of this. What has changed? So much changed. You see, sculptural plasticity, as I introduce a note here, sculpturesque plasticity. Now this curtain wall of plasters, so I don't want to say exaggerated, but so in a way underlined, so pointed that wall is almost gone. Wall is not there. Wall is almost lost. Even with the introduction of these great sculpture with angels and an armory at this, a badge at the middle, probably a cross, I cannot see, and cupids at the top in this pediment, altogether entirely hides the central part at the background. You see how architectural ornamentation elements now ruling the design of a facade, how they create a kind of curtain wall as an independent unit. This is Baroque. This is Baroque. This is Baroque. This kind of an approach, of course, introduces us with a new reality. This reality is to start to forget about those meaningful relationships between the parts, stagnation, gradation, integration, kind of, how can I say, design techniques, let me say as such, design techniques that would, that were the products of a brain, Renaissance brain, which was looking for a unity in the world to be imposed by human minds. Return to Catholic, Roman Catholicism, and in a way, religious realities, let me say as such, medieval realities, maybe introduced a kind of escape from the realities of architectural design. Now drama, the theme, Santi Vincenzo and Anastasio Trevi. I mean, these saints and their deeds, their roles, their dramatic involvements in religious culture altogether are the main arguments of the designer. These are the arguments of the church, but designer was given with the task to introduce a background for the expression of this argument. And now architecture gradually becoming a kind of medium for a kind of cultural background, instead of designers partly independent task. Oh my God, look at this interior now. Santa Maria della Vittoria. The church is known for the masterpiece of Gian Lorenzo Bernini in the Cornara Chapel. Look at it. This is a work by Gian Lorenzo Bernini, a sculpture, The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. And this sculpture is there to give an idea of a religious figure, a historical religious figure, Saint Teresa, around which the entire church is composed with its ideological premises altogether. Then, instead of the church itself, with its structural entity, with its, architectural aesthetics, now what we have here, a sculpture representing a drama of a past religious figure that the church dedicated. And in a way, this is more central to any other thing within the church. And of course, artists' ability to introduce this drama, to introduce this figure with the sculpture is more prominent than architect's design. One point is that here. But another point is, okay, this is the drama, this is the sculpture and the artist here at the center, but it is also rendered a part of a space, an architectural space. Now, architecture in the background, but sculptural elements, plasticity is so organized that this curtain wall of the architecture is rendered a kind of theatrical scene, a kind of stage. And a stage is a stage, yani. Without a stage, we cannot create the atmosphere. And it is also prominent, yani. Without furniture, without the ornamentations, without doors, windows, ceiling, and so forth. I mean, a theatrical play maybe would be not much meaningful, since this drama or tragedy or comedy, takes place in an environment. This is written as such in the scenario. You play the scenario, but you don't have the architectural setting. This is not possible, yani. Then architectural scenery is still important. But what we have, plasticity and sculpture, in a way, stand here like covers. They are more prominent. It's their focus of the event. But relationships are well provided, and this unity of architecture and ornamentation is an example of Gesamtkunstwerk. I told you before this, a German term, Gesamtkunstwerk, yani Kunstwerk, artwork, Gesamt altogether art, an artwork in a well-organized, whole. This is the very, very, very rough definition of the concept, but useful. You organize everything in relation to each other, but more central, of course, is Saint Teresa, the sculpture there. Architecture is a setting, but as a setting, it is also useful. Yani. Then I don't much believe those rough differentiations made between different approaches. For example, architecture is so important, abstract, constructivism, the constructivism and so forth. Without ornamentation, architecture is at the front, it's great. Architecture sometimes is at the background, sometimes at the foreground. I mean, it depends on the setting, it depends on the locality, it depends. I mean, there are varieties, different ways, and we shouldn't, because every standpoint, if it is, carefully done, well designed, well produced, pleasing to the eye, and also, to be appreciated by the visitors, I mean, is valuable. Every initiative taken to introduce well architecture, good architecture, let me tell us as good architecture, is valuable. And in my opinion, and as attitudes of the designer to create a background setting needs to be appreciated, since with this he aims to introduce something else, and this something else made him or her to design is something in this attitude in this manner, and we should appreciate this as well, because it is a work. It is a kind of, how can I say, a human act and product at the end that puts ourselves as audience, parts of the audience, as viewers, in a in an environment where we are part of a perspective, in here. This is valuable. This is valuable, and from our viewpoint, then we appreciate the sculpture, we appreciate the background, we appreciate, the architectural space we are inside altogether. This is Gesamtkunstwerk, and this makes us a part of it. There is no distance between us and the environment. It takes us in the drama. This drama reflected as part of a great design of architecture, and we are the users of this interior space, and we are part of it. This is, of course, valuable. You understand what I mean? I'm struggling to explain myself in order to convince you the fact that, oh my God, it is 10 minutes. The fact that architecture is really good when it is produced at a significantly well-designed and well-organized way. Okay. Let me check who are around. Okay. I would like to stop this presentation and have a break of 10 minutes. We can meet 10 to 11. Any question in the chat? Good morning. Hocam demiş birisi sağ olsun. Good morning to you again. Though still a bit late. But, it's good to express this. Peki. Görüşürüz. Teşekkürler. Share screen. Evet. Herkes görüyor mu?
Görünüyor hocam.
Tamam, teşekkürler. Okay. The Church of St. Ignatius of Loyola is a good case to illustrate this understanding of Gesamtkunstwerk. It was painted by Andrea Pozzo, the vault of the nave. This barrel vault here, painted by Andrea Pozzo, who was also a Jesuit lay brother. It is a typical transept basilica with a dome, as you can see here. But except this dome, you cannot get a really architectural sense here, since the entire vault turned into a canvas of a painter. The vault itself, you see, now is a building. Here we have the drum, and kasnak of a dome introduced. These pilasters, cornices all together are all shadows, actually. They are not real pilasters and cornices. They are all paints. Central part is open. There's a great oculus at the center, and angels and humankind soar their ascent to God, and this connection between supraterrestrial domain, heavens, is provided with the lower zone, as if your body turns into a separate floating in the sky and soaring and going up by means of this opening and join God. This is the idea given. Here then, really, this ceiling is a medium to illustrate this idea of direct connection between heavens and spirits. This is the idea. And you wouldn't expect such a notion in any pre-Baroque church given by decorative pieces. Here it is not sculpture, but painting, contributing this decorative program, greatly contributing to it. Even the walls of the church, actually, as if here we have a single separate church interior, unconnected to the Church of St. Ignatius, down with its walls, with its drum, with its open dome, with an oculus at the center altogether, as if a separate church is painted in the scene. The idea is not that, of course. The idea is to elongate the church, rise it in the vaults and lead you to the heavens, turn you into spirits and lead you to the heavens. You see the religious message, how it dominates everything here. This is the reason why Baroque art is regarded by some as a mean of propaganda for the Catholic Church, to create an impact upon the visitors and put a remark on their mind. Put a mark on their mind, and in a way make them part of this ideology, this not only ideology, this history of the church, because there are saints, each church dedicated to a saint. This means that this church has a history, a specific history in relation to the saint, and saints are almost always associated with early history of Christianity. They are regarded as the founders of Christianity, or medieval saints also. Now we are in the 17th century, and medieval age is part of a great Christian past now, and history of the saints associated with the church. Then church is made a part of a great, religious background. It couldn't be taken only as a kind of building for ceremonies, building for prayer. No, now church is part of a history, and this history should have been given directly by means of paintings. Of course, inscriptions would also contribute, but painting, there's a direct, expression of a topic, of a theme related to the past. Then painting is preferred, and Baroque church now transformed into arenas where the art of painting had a great place. Actually, church is now a canvas. Church is now a canvas. Sorry. Okay. We have always prominent designers, great artists, architects. We have modest designers, modest paintings, modest architects. Among the Baroque designers, we really have great creators like Bernini, Borromini, Guarini. I would like to give a number of examples from their works. This is a church by Bernini, Sant'Andrea al Quirinale, 17th century. In this church, we have an oval plan, as you can see, typically Baroque. This idea of Gesamtkunstwerk and total work of art, in a way, could be best introduced by means of an oval interior in which you can relate parts with volutes, with undulating forms in a way. And potential of the oval is employed by Bernini here in Sant'Andrea al Quirinale in Rome. Entrance piece is composed of a great pedimented arch. In front of the arch is a porch. They say in English, porch, P-O-R-C-H. It's rounded projection, semi-spherical rounded projection is in relation to the background oval, but there is an intermediary angled facade between those two. Then we understand that Bernini would like to put his church in the tradition of earlier Renaissance and Baroque pedimented facades. Bakın, pedimented facades. At the same time, in a way, introducing an oval. But as I told you before, oval was experienced by other architects too earlier. But oval, the potentials of oval best worked by Baroque architects. This is one of the new churches on these grand avenues opened by the popes of 17th century. We have chapels inserted within the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4 chapels. Then a cross pattern is obtained, as you can see. A cross pattern is obtained. But there is no true cross in relation to the directions or the central parts of the oval, east, west, north, south. This diagonal placement of the cross is highly interesting, which introduces inside a dynamism, breaking the rigidity of the Renaissance. This great Sant'Andrea sculpture above the apse with his hands risen like this and looking up in a way takes the dome down or takes himself or ourselves up in a way, introducing a kind of communication between different domains. When you look at this decorative program, you understand that we're really confronting a great designer, the use of colors, the well-balanced amount of the plasticity, elements of plasticity, pilasters like this, and this entablature, all ornamental devices, and the arts in between, well-balanced, well-proportioned, as you can see, and Baroque's ornamentational additions in the foreground of the architecture at the back is well-balanced when compared to the other cases. For example, this example where we don't have a church in a typical Bernini style. It is decorated by different artists, and these different artists in a way introduced decorative elements, and this separation between the architecture itself and decorative elements and sculpture altogether is not present here. These monuments is the work of Bernini altogether with its architecture and sculpture. And it introduced the occasion for Bernini to design all in relation to each other. This is really a complete artwork by an architect who is excelled in the art of sculpture and architectural design, and both introduced in a in a comprehensive and harmonious manner. Actually, we have still this facade separate from the background, since we have an oval in the background, and we have an entrance piece, pedimented entrance piece, not maybe in contradiction, but not in a direct relationship with the background, as you can see. Compare it with Mimar Sinan's facades in relation to the backgrounds, to the interiors. I mean, how these correspondence is realized by architects. Now, we never see this in any Renaissance or Baroque works of architecture. This unity of Sinan is unique in history of architecture. This is a fact. But still, we have a search for unity within this oval itself. And elements are related to each other better than earlier examples, but never reach, of course, to the level of Mimar Sinan's, integrated designs. Since this great cornice separates upper and lower zones, while at the same time they're related with these elements, these arches, as you can see within the dome, and the pilasters, attached columns on the walls, and these great rounded arches correspond to the segments between these arches in the dome. There is a tendency to integrate, to relate, but divisions also so clearly pointed out that this integration is not central, or was not looked as a primary aim by the architect. This is a feature here we find in San Andrea al Quirinale by Bernini. Bernini also designed this great courtyard in front of St. Peter's in the Vatican today. Here is a kind of square, actually, more than courtyard of a church. We are before a great square, an urban piece, created for gatherings, specific religious ceremonies. Bernini was invited to introduce or to organize this space in front of St. Peter's. His idea was to see the potentials of the site in relation to the role played by Vatican, indirectly by Pope, and he interpreted it as, the place in Rome where Christians embraced by Pope. And this oval section at the center is like the arms of the Pope, of the church embracing believers. Remember this notion of an oval courtyard first experienced by Michelangelo. Michelangelo is not regarded a Baroque architect. He is a Mannerist architect, but he heralded Baroque with his design, and Baroque architects later on modeled their oval designs upon the potentials introduced by Michelangelo. Michelangelo is the founder, discoverer of the potentials of the oval, and Bernini is a follower of him, as you can see here. These arms are made up of with arcades, and this oval here obtained by them, connected with the church by these trapezoidal arcades introduced between this oval and the church. Very similar, really, to Campidoglio, courtyard. In this courtyard, remember, Michelangelo employed the same. Bernini took this idea from Michelangelo. There is no reason to criticize him because designers learn from each other. But the concept here is totally different than the one in Campidoglio. You can compare them later on. I dealt with it in the Renaissance section. There we had a courtyard between buildings, remember? Placed trapezoidal. Here we have great arcades embracing an oval at the center. The place is different spots where this square is different altogether. The only connecting elements of those two is this oval courtyard, and oval is an anonymous shape. Everybody would use oval for his designs. I mean, but let me tell you that this notion of an oval courtyard is an idea by Michelangelo. And this should be regarded not only a courtyard distinct from the city, since we have a great avenue leading to the river. At the back, you see. Anyway, maybe somebody here can remind me. Here we have then this great avenue leading to this pond here, the bridge, to cross the river. And there is Piazza Popolo somewhere here. I showed you in the beginning of the lecture. Let me show you. Maybe it would be great to remember. Here we have St. Peter's with the great avenue leading to the pond. This is Adrian's tomb. From the pond, you go to the other side of the river bank and reach, if you would like to Piazza Popolo here, and following the web of roads and great avenues, reach to the great basilicas. It's a kind of pilgrimage route then, or probably St. Peter's is the beginning of can be regarded as the beginning of this pilgrimage road. You are embraced by the church, then led to the world, traveling from one church to the other, praying to God. This is the idea. Evet. In Istanbul, we have great complexes on the hills like Süleymaniye, Nur Osmaniye, Fatih, ondan sonra Mihrimah, Şehzadebaşı, Yavuz Sultan Selim mosques, great mosques on 7 hills, and avenues, a great avenue from Sultanahmet Square, Divan Yolu, all the way through Bayazıt, reaches to Fatih and Edirne Kapısı, and there are külliyes on the way. You would inquire, Hocam, did a similar pilgrimage route or a kind of strolling paths introduced with this placement of the külliyes? Let me tell you that these külliyes emerged in different periods from 15th century to 18th century. There is no single sultan introducing great avenues with basilicas restored and so forth. Then we cannot regard it as an urban planning attempt like in 17th century Rome. But what we know that those specific buildings, for example, Süleymaniye, Great Süleymaniye Mosque, when it was first built, was rendered the how can I say, the focus of a royal procession. Sultan Süleyman, during Friday prayer time, Cuma Selamlığı they say, would travel from his palace to Süleymaniye. all the way along, işte Divan Yolu and the following today's Ordu Caddesi and Fevzi Paşa, and reached to Süleymaniye. In the 18th century, when Sultan Osman designed the Osmaniye Mosque, finalized actually, because another sultan started, Mahmud started. Anyway, these two sultans, when they organized this area as the Külliye, new Külliye in the city, they also planned another route from Topkapı Palace by means of Cağaloğlu to reach Nur Osmaniye. What I would like to tell you is that in Istanbul also we have paths, ceremonial paths employed by sultans during Cuma Selamlığı, to reach and to pray. In a way, they went to their own mosque during Cuma Selamlığı on Fridays, and this travel from one part of the city to other by the royals was a significant act, in a way connecting urban planning, at least planning of the roads, to a concept. Yani, not similar, since Istanbul was not a pilgrimage center, and pilgrims did not travel to Istanbul to visit one mosque after others, but the visit of the royals, gradually introduced a kind of urban use to great monumental buildings. Let me tell you that in Vatican, Pope lived next to St. Peter's here, and Sistine Chapel is somewhere here, by the way. Popes lived here, very close to the mosque, to the church, sorry. And they didn't travel from one church to the other at certain intervals, while in Istanbul, this happened. The only difference is that. Evet. St. Peter's facade, Carlo Maderno, 17th century. I mean, pay attention how Maderno referred to Renaissance. Renaissance of Bramante, Renaissance of Michelangelo. I mean, in this great facade with its, how can I say, the word is important here, robust, they say in English, robust expression of elements and the proportional ideals altogether give us a sense of Renaissance, early Renaissance, instead of Baroque, decorative standpoint, let me tell as such. In a way, it is robust, it is classical, probably due to its earlier history of construction, which took almost a century. Maderno preferred to refer to the design by Bramante. I mean, in introducing almost non-Baroque, more classical facade. This is what makes this Maderno's work different than contemporary Baroque designs. Unfortunately, still at the back, we have a great transept dome and the facade at the end of the basilica axis, horizontal axis altogether, prevents this great integrity introduced before by Bramante, but mostly by Michelangelo later on. This is broken. Evet, this is the extended nave. Here it is. How this integration is spoiled, and the great facade edits by Maderno can be best seen in these slides. Here is the basilica. Normally, you would expect to find a great centralized building by Bramante than Michelangelo, but this become spoiled by the addition of this facade, unfortunately. Inside St. Peter's, there is a great baldachin by Bernini. It is well known in art history. You would find it in almost every book on Baroque art. Great, several columns reproduce a baldachin that is based upon the fire temples of ancient Iran. The idea is there, and all throughout the ages it is employed. Though we don't have a great baldachin here, like we find in Mimar Sinan's buildings, we say çardak değil mi? In Turkish çardak, çahartaktan geliyor, çardak for arches. Yani this great çardak or çahartak or baldachin, whatever say, is not maybe a design determining or structure determining elements in this church by Renaissance and Baroque, mostly Renaissance architects. This baldachin introduces the elements here, which is essential. This is the essence of architecture, actually. Post and lintel system. Değil mi? Post and lintel yani işte. Elements that provide standing of an architecture as the vertical elements, and the elements that creates a space are the horizontal elements. And the most appropriate symbol of this togetherness of vertical and horizontal elements is a baldachin. There is another name given in with a more Christian sense, ciborium. Ciborium. Baldachin is named ciborium in Christian churches. Evet. This is a nice example by Bernini, made of bronze entirely, regarded symbolic of Baroque art. Another great architect of Baroque is Borromini. He was given a task to introduce a church at a square in Rome. And the church is given the name after the fountains at the square. There are 4 fountains at the square at the 4 corners, and the church is named San Carlo of the 4 fountains. San Carlo is the saint this church dedicated. 4 fountains is the square this church is next to. Now, I would like to give a closer view of this church facade. In Borromini's style, specifically in San Carlo alle 4 Fontane facade, what we have an utmost plasticity. Utmost plasticity. Wall gone. Wall is almost gone, as you can see here. What we here have are decorative architectural elements. Post and lintel system expressed as decorative elements. As you can see, there are no function attached to these elements. Of course, there's a wall at the background, and this wall, supports itself. The other elements at the front of it are decorative, as you can see, and of course, give the sense of an architecture based upon a structural system, post and lintel system, but it is fake. It is a kind of screen wall made up of, as I told you, decorative elements. Emil Kaufman says this is a confession of the. It is so harsh, yeah. So harsh. This criticism is so harsh. I don't know. There are other reasons why this plasticity become underlined. I mean, İşte, this is San Carlo at the center praying to God. The message directly given, then sculpture is needed to do that. I mean, inscription is about, San Carlo, and in a way also presence of Christian history, also given by the inscription. In a way, this dramatic expression, is a welcome to the passerbys, to the Christians. You know, this is the church where you have a history, you have a culture, it embraces you, come in. This is a message, of course, a propaganda at the same time. But I should also tell you that there is a development for that. I mean, it's not only one-time experience by an architect, you know, a churchman or a group of churchmen asking him, okay, create a propaganda work. No, it is not. As I explained to you, there is a development, there's a process for that, especially these pictures. I narrated it, I explained it in detail, then I don't want to repeat myself. In these developments, what we have, proportional elements altered, differentiated, or elements that make the proportional system differentiated. And now plasticity is more pronounced, and architecture turned into a kind of medium. But this is a gradual process, you know, and scholars like Kaufman finds its incubation in the early Renaissance, you know, attempt to realize integration. He says that they couldn't reach to integration by means of elements, well proportions, then they would like to express this by means of a great exaggerated plasticity. This is his idea, and it is also meaningful. Then one of the reasons why this plasticity applied is this search for integration by means of undulating cornices, great projections. You bring elements together by means of a different compositional order instead of in Sinan's more elementary proportional order, where elements are integrated and also the background taken outside altogether. This is done in a different manner by Baroque architects because they couldn't integrate building in all its facets, in all its parts, inner, outer, different facades and so forth, and structural system and plasticity, no. Then they preferred to introduce a great plasticity. This is Kaufman's idea, and it is meaningful still. But this criticism, or I don't know, this evaluation shouldn't lead us to refute and discard Baroque as an attempt that reached to unsuccessful conclusions. No, we shouldn't discard it as such. In here, there is also a potential. There's also an idea, which is also necessitated by a new religious culture atmosphere. I hope I have been able to explain myself properly, my students. Okay. When you look at the interior, you understand that Borromini is clever enough to enrich his designs by means of geometrical forms. Look at it. Okay, when we look at it, you find an oval interior with an oval dome. So simple, like in Bernini. Neydi onun adı? Hemen gidelim. İşte Standard Real Quirinale, değil mi? Very simple. Look at the plan. An oval with a thick wall and chapels introduced within it. A cross is obtained and so forth. But here, Borromini, used a different system, maybe in other slides, maybe later on, I don't know. A different system based upon triangles, you see, two back-to-back placed triangles and circles within it, give us essentially architectural elements organized after intersection points, not maybe as direct as in the Dome of the Rock, remember, but still we have, I don't know, sometimes this looked like an original, yes, the original plan by Borromini. So because sometimes scholars impose geometrical forms upon existing plans and claim that, oh, I discovered golden mean here, this is a great design based on golden mean, though designer had nothing to do with golden mean, did not even think about it. This sometimes happens, but in this case, we have really a geometry based by Borromini himself upon forms like two triangles back to back and circles, and the diagonals intersecting at the center of the circles altogether give us the center of these walls with the columns on the two sides of this axis. Yani, then we can say that plan and section of the monument is based on equilateral, yani eşit triangular system instead of classical column diameter model. A climax created by contrast between fluidity of curvilinear surfaces and angled hidden triangle. This is not my interpretation by a scholar. I don't really remember. Then what we have here, curvilinear surfaces and angled hidden triangles altogether create a dynamism here that is a geometrical, can I say, organizing principle, a system based upon this principle, triangle, and the plasticity imposed on this system, which introduces undulating forms, rounded forms, typically Baroque, in a way eliminating the rigidity of the geometrical systems introduced in Renaissance, but at the same time keeping them. But you would ask, no, Jam, this is an architectural work of art and geometry is always there. Otherwise, without mathematics and geometry, you wouldn't stand a monument. Okay, of course it is there, but Baroque undulation, plasticity is not always there, yani, değil mi? Then there is this reality of the design, 17th century design, in a way introducing a new style, what we name today Baroque, upon existing, systems, structural systems based upon Euclid geometry. Peki, what about the elements? Color white, first of all, introduces this concept of unity. Just a single color, which is white. White kills details, unfortunately. So, when you introduce white to everywhere, then shadows and, and lighted pieces just disappear, and uniformity is created by means of them. You understand then that Borromini deliberately selected white in order to introduce this idea of integration of different elements and to hide the separations, differentiations, relate upper and lower zones. Nice, huh? Nice. Maybe outside is not directly related with inside, since we just have a single outside facade in front of an oval here, you see, just which is very separate from the background. But in this unit inside and in this unit outside, we have really a search for unity and integration. Yani, it is not a complete unity and integration as we find in Sinan, but separately these pieces mainly based upon this concept. Cloister, you should learn this, is a part where seminars, educational facilities take place. This is a monastery complex, and cloister is the inner courtyard around which rooms organized or passages to different parts organized. Almost every church complex contains a cloister, a courtyard. And this courtyard, this cloister is also organized almost, not a complete, okay, I cannot say so. I mean, it is not an oval courtyard, but softened corners give us a sense of this oval that we find in even Hagia Sophia Church. Peki, let's have a break, huh? For 10 minutes. We can meet a quarter to 12. Evet, a quarter to 12. Bye-bye. I just finalized Borromini's San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. I would like to show you another work by Borromini, Sant'Ivo alla Sapienza. This is the name of the church from the middle of the 17th century. Borromini was given task to design a church at the end of those arcades, and he superbly organized this space in turning this place between the arcades into a courtyard of the church, but he couldn't organize this courtyard as an oval of the times. It was a earlier rigid Renaissance environment, but he introduced an oval apse-like facades to connect those angled rectangle of the courtyard, and he managed really kind of can I say Baroque facade in relation to the surrounding units. It is a different concept, different concept actually. There's a dichotomy, of course, you could also say this, between those side arcades and the oval facade across us, but it's a different concept. And I should remind you, Hagia Sophia interior, with the arcades running to the apse, there are exedras, değil mi? Intermediary zones, right and left in Hagia Sophia. Then comes the semicircle of the apse after this exedras, and this total oval eastern and western ends of the church turn the interior into a more Baroque. It's not a Baroque interior, but more Baroque interior. We are in 6th century, and designers understood the potentials of this configuration of the facade as an oval, as a rounded body. Then in every style we have a universality, and in different periods designers understood the potentials of different approaches. Even scholars find, for example, in ancient Greek sculpture, phases to be named as archaic, classical, and Baroque. They regard the earlier 7th, 6th century sculpture from mainland Greece as the archaic phase, archaic sculpture under the impact of Egyptian sculpture. Later, they find eclecticism in the art of the 5th century, the age of Pericles, the 5th century classical sculpture. These great sculptures of ancient Greece, mostly produced in the 5th century, the ideal proportions, idealized bodies, and so forth. Later in the 4th century, in the age of Alexander the Great, we find a period named Hellenistic Age. when we find these great sculptures, with convoluting bodies, rounded bodies, big muscles, like the Pergamum altar sculpture now in the Berlin Pergamon Museum, where we have a Baroque tendency to create a dramatic central point, and the body is in movement in relation to this dramatic essential theme. This is Hellenism, which is regarded as Baroque. Then potentials of different geometrical forms, different configurations after, different geometrical forms and proportions understood in different periods. This is a fact. And here we have a Baroque facade, which reminded me the apse of Hagia Sophia with the arcades running to it, 6th century, 17th century. There is something that connects those two, but we are in a total different period. But we also have a classical background for here, 16th century, değil mi? 16th century Renaissance. We also had a classical background for Hagia Sophia, işte Roman architecture, değil mi? Classical Roman architecture and Hagia Sophia. A similar tendency in Mimar Sinan. Mimar Sinan, if we regard him a Baroque architect, then we have the classical background, işte, değil mi? Early Islamic, Seljuk, early Ottoman. Then came Mimar Sinan as a Baroque architect. Okay. This facade, in a way, again, hides the background. Let me go first to the plan. The background is as such, you see. The background is as such. And this facade, concave facade, has nothing to do with the background. Background is totally based upon a geometrical form, again, triangle, two intersecting triangles creating a hexagon. This triangular configuration at the background cannot be pursued here in the facade, but as I explained many times, this is a feature of Renaissance and Baroque architects' separate organization of facades. Above this intersecting triangles, we have a great projecting drum, again rounded, and a kind of finial with a spiral design, as if designer would like to contradict his angled plan underneath. He introduces a kind of endless spiral, breaking the rules. Actually, the entire concept is as such. You have the rule, you have two intersecting triangles, but plasticity hides it, covers it, breaks the rules. In a way, this is the reason why we have a great dramatic impact in Baroque church. You hide, you cover the geometrical system, order, that is to be expected to be found in any architectural design. And in this way, it is, of course, to the viewer. The task of the viewer is to discover this kind of relationships. Otherwise, you just visit it. Oh, nice church, beautiful sculpture, nice design. Go on. But if you start to analyze the plan, organization, different geometrical relationships here, two intersecting triangles, then how they are related to the ornamentational plasticity. Here, for example, we have these intersecting triangles expressed differently. Here, in this case, we have a semicircle. Here we have this trapezoidal diagonal placed lines with, again, a semicircle ending them altogether give one of the triangles. Here it is, one triangle here. The other one is here emphasized. Then these relationships become clearer when you start to inspect. At the center, we have a great cone-like cone, yani pyramid-like projection, which is expressed as such outside. The contours of the intersecting triangle still visible, but you don't get this idea of a pyramidal projection. This is the art of architect. I mean, he organized everything in a varied manner, but also in relation to each other. You should spend more time to understand, maybe not here, but later on, if you come back to the slides, try to understand what the architect would like to do. When you start to write, of course, with a reasonable comment based upon the existing issues, when you start to write them, this is the beginning of your understanding of the intentions of the architects. İşte two intersecting triangles and these forms developed after these triangles, intersecting triangles, how these, how can I say, flutes or projecting lines and the concaves between are related to this, lower configuration of the drum and so forth. I mean, these are features you write on paper, but also these are features taught by the architect himself. He thought so. He thought, okay, I could introduce two triangles, obtain a hexagon, and this hexagon, the contours of the hexagon should be broken as such, and this plasticity would contribute, to this impact. Then on the outside, I should put this in such a way to introduce an aesthetic pleasure, and so forth. When you start to write this, you started to enliven the designer. He starts to think and talk with you. This is nice. This is very nice. I mean, you see how grateful, how powerful is architectural design. How design is powerful, because by means of that, you can penetrate mentalities of the people in the past. By means of that, you can understand the endeavors of humankind to realize himself or herself. Yeah, this is the aspect of artistry, architectural history, which really puts it at a level in other sciences, I mean, which is so significant. I mean, humanities, this is really humanities. You penetrate the human mind by means of artistry readings, as we do here. Okay. Interior, again, white, bakın. Borromini liked white, since he understood the potentials of the color of white to bring the pieces together. Maybe he realized the fact that, okay, our architects of the age introduced so many divergences, differences, I mean, contradictory elements, I mean, while looking for integration, harmony, and so forth, but couldn't refrain themselves from playing with those very different kind of forms, and putting them in orders, in stages, trying to integrate them. Okay, forget about them. My white has a potential initially to do that, and he preferred white really, and for this reason. Because one would inquire, why should this be in white? White is not a nice color. I mean, it is troublesome. I mean, it creates a burden upon you. I mean, you get tired in a white interior. I mean, it restricts you, shadows and lightened sections, void and solids altogether lost. But when you understand the intentions of Borromini, why he came to this conclusion, preferring white to the other colors, probably, we don't know, but probably had a great intention, had a great reason, and we start to appreciate that. Here we have the pineal, cypriol, as I indicated to you, introduced in contradiction to the great triangular plan coordinating the substructure. Spiral is a symbol of infinity. Spiral is a symbol of supraterrestrial travels, adventures, and ascension altogether. Different connotations attached to Spiral. Borromini would like to free himself from the restrictions of the geometry by means of Spiral. Probably for this reason, employed it here. I would like to introduce you a great staircase created by Borromini in a palace, Palazzo Barberi. I know Baroque well because I made a postdoc on Baroque architecture in Canada, and I traveled to Italy. I had a scholarship from Italian government. I visited all these buildings, and this staircase is one of them. I went there and visited it, and really a great staircase, which later on left a profound trace upon designers who visited this site, this building. It is a staircase based upon a diagonal. Again, like the one here, we have a spiral. This idea of ascension by means of a platform, a whirling platform. Ne hatırlattı bu size? What is the değil mi? Malviya. What was Malviya? The minaret in the Samarra Great Mosque. Remember, the Great Mosque with the minaret. Malviya with the spiral platform leading to the topmost point. This is the architectural history precedent. I don't know whether I don't think that Borromini knew these monuments. Very difficult, very difficult. But the idea is nice, and he employed it. This spiral, this finial here, and his staircase is entirely based upon this idea of a whirling platform. Now it is more functional, of course, than the earlier example. It is not functional here. It is just an ornamental device. Of course, symbolic function is there, connotations, but architecturally speaking, from the relationship of form and function, it is not functional. But here it is also functional. This is a staircase that from the bottom to top leads you up along a whirling path, which makes it easier to go up. Slowly, you can climb the steps and go up without much tired. It's a good idea again, and also aesthetically pleasing, really pleasing from down to up, from up to down. When you look at it, you understand the nice design introduced by means of this diagonal design. Here we have it as a spiral then, in a way introduced by Borromini in relation to his earlier designs. Okay. And then a modern architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, employs this potential in his Guggenheim Museum in New York, 20th century, in a similar way. Most probably he visited Borromini's staircase and inspired from it and introduced the idea in a very not similar, same way. Again, we have a great staircase, but this staircase turned into an exhibition pathway, since on the walls of this diagonal platform, paintings are hung, and visitors, while going up by means of this platform, would visit these paintings and appreciate them. This is an idea then associated with the idea of ascent by means of a staircase in a diagonal form. You understand what I mean? There are no steps in Guggenheim Museum. No steps. You just go up, not climbing steps, but a straight way. So simple. But the idea is a staircase going leading you up from Borromedes. This is another example of how architects inspired by examples produced, offered, before them. A nice occasion also to make aware this reality of modern architecture, where abstraction of the past inventions frequently occurred. Modern architecture is like a cubist painting, you have the form, but abstracted. Another Baroque architect is Guarini, who was active in the north of Italy, mostly in Turin. We say Torino in Turkish, Turin, in the north, next to the Alp Mountains, as you can see in the background. Guarini designed their church and other buildings. One of them is the Church of San Lorenzo. In this design, we have again the geometry employed by Guarini, like Borromini. He learned this from this tradition, of course. I mean, Guarini learned this from this tradition and employed again triangles like this intersecting. It is an eight-pointed star, probably based upon two squares. There is a great geometrical background here, which is liberally exposed without being hidden, like done by Borromini. From this viewpoint, Borromini is more successful because he would like to balance his geometrical order in the design and plasticity at the foreground. But Guarini did not attempt to do that. You can see this geometrical background almost totally exposed to the viewer, specifically by means of these domes, as you can see. The design of the lower structure is also in tune with the geometry of the dome, or geometrical decoration in the dome. These complete each other. He has a personal, of course, design approach. And in this design approach, as I have been trying to explain you, he employed greatly geometrical forms, major geometrical forms, and produced his orders after them in relation to the plasticity, Baroque plasticity. From this perspective, it is not as he is not as inventive as Borromini or Bernini, but one of the prominent architects of Baroque. This section is the bema with the apse of the church. This section is the naos, is the main prayer area. Then he introduced a division between this and that in introducing two domes over those two different parts. This is the central part, the prayer zone, naos, as you can see, based upon an octagon. Nice design, really. A successful design. Everything is in place in relation to each other. Pay attention how he employed a similar composition after Borromini's work. Look at it. Remember this, değil mi? Santivala Sapienza, a similar organization of the intersecting geometrical forms by means of this cornice. Probably he was inspired by Borromini in this design. Sure, değil mi? So there is a difference, of course. We cannot say that he copied, but also striking similarities exist. Probably because he also employed intersecting triangles. Cappella della Sacra Sindone is the place where a holy relic preserved, the face of Christ on textile, on a piece of textile. Here he tried with this kind of dome we name Korbel dome or Kırlangıç Kubbe in Turkish. Here we have superposed arches with windows on a hexagonal base. Here we have, pay attention how he adored geometrical forms and created his designs after this rigid Euclid geometry, but very well balanced plasticity in relation to this geometry, but geometry is dominant, let me say as such. Borromini's great balance, turning interior into sculpture, is not present in Guarini's works. Here we have a great design again. Let me just in a minute, I should in a way give a break here, very important phone call. I am very sorry, but a very important phone call arrived and I should have directed to somebody else at home. Sorry for this. Palazzo Carignano by Guarini in Turin is a nice example of a secular building with a great facade, undulating facade, well organized in relation to a background. In this background, we have staircases, bakın, inserted within this undulating form, staircases. You enter by means of these gates. If you turn right and left, you reach to these staircases, and you are led to the other floors above. It's a nice organization of functional elements like a staircase and decorative facades. Look at it. The great heavy Baroque of the south is not present in the north. It's a more secular province, Turin, Savoy. Great palaces, really. And there's a local dynasty, Savoy dynasty of French origin. And this dynasty commissioned great palaces there from 17th century, Baroque palaces. And in this part of France, the heavy Baroque art of the south was not present and still is not present. And this architecture is, how can I say, more modest in terms of this Baroque plasticity. Well, for this reason, the north of Italy is different than the south, as always. Here we have a great basilica, which signifies the end of Baroque in Italy, by Juvarra, Filippo Juvarra, the Basilica of Superga, near Turin. Look at it. Almost no Baroque elements. Classicism is back. You look at it and discover this great portico distinct from the body, projecting as if confessing the fact that, okay, I am leaving all Baroque ideals, which are not much successful to integrate. I am alone. This tower as well, this dome as well. The parts are so pronounced in their individuality, though the central part is still in the Baroque tradition, having a rounded order with corner chapels. This is a Baroque tendency at the center, but the elements now are more independent than before, and classicism returns. You see, inside, as I told you, there are Baroque decorative elements, but very restricted. Great post and lintel system pronounced is a reference to class. Actually, Savoy dynasty had a great interest in classical themes. I visited one of their palaces realizing the fact that in the frescoes, ancient Greek mythology, and almost animated. And I understood that, okay, in the 17th century, they really appreciated ancient Greece, yani, even in the 17th century, before 18th century, before Enlightenment culture in France. In the South, they appreciated ancient Roman and Greek and Roman culture. And for this reason, in the north of Italy, it is more, how can I say, more of classical than the sentimental, Catholic Baroque of the popes. Later on, in the 18th century Enlightenment architecture of France, this would be more profoundly expressed. A Versailles by Louis XIV, even in the 17th century, is different than any Baroque design we find in Italy. In the 18th century, this will totally change. And neoclassicism will emerge. Palace of Versailles, 17th century. Expansions introduced, first by Louis Le Vau. 2 wings were added. This is the palace. Maybe it is not easy to see. Here it is, 2 wings, you see, right and left wings added. One for servant quarters and kitchens, the other for stables. In 1668, he added 3 new wings built of stone known as the envelope to the north, south, and west. These are the wings added. These buildings had nearly flat roofs covered with lead. The king also commissioned the landscape designer André Lenoir. Then we should speak of 2 designers. One is architectural design made by Louis Le Vau, architect Louis Le Vau, and the landscape design Lenôtre. André Lenôtre created the most magnificent gardens in Europe, embellished with fountains, statues, basins, canals, geometric flower beds. He also added 2 grottos in the Italian style. These grottos are here, somewhere here. I like them very much. He also added 2 grottos, an immense orangery to house fruit trees, as well as a zoo with a central pavilion for exotic animals. After Le Vau's death in 1670, the work was taken over by François d'Orbay. Then 3 designers, Louis Le Vau, André Lenôtre, François d'Orbay. These are French spellings of the names. Here we have Palace of Versailles, 1678, Cour Royale, Cour de Marbre are the names given those different parts. As you can see, here we have a great, where was it? Where is it? This great church. Where did it go? I cannot see. This is the church I saw. I don't want to mislead you. I should look at the facade. It is hidden behind these facades. I cannot. This, and that. Yeah, this is a view from the Versailles city. This is the Versailles city. This is a view from the Versailles city. This is a view from the gardens at the back. Gardens at the back from here or from here. This is the city of Versailles, later developed. A view from here. Here it is, a view from here, and a view from the gardens. Then it's not easy for me to find the church. The church is one of these buildings that I don't really want to mislead you. I'm looking for the apps. One is church, one is opera house. But I don't really want to mislead you. I can check later on. Inside Versailles Palace, there is a gallery, or hall of mirrors, Galerie de Glace, hall of mirrors. I mean, well known, 17th century. As I told you, there is a French Baroque, where French classicism reigns. And in this Baroque, we have the elements more strained. They are not as expressive as we find in Italy. Later on to be replaced by a local style we name Rococo. Rococo. These interiors would be redesigned in the 18th century by Louis XV in Rococo style. And some of the features, details are in Rococo. Chateau de Marly is another building. Architect Jules Arduin Mansart and painter Charles Brun designed this palace. At the center is Chateau de Roi, yani the mansion of the king. On the right and left, we have six mansions graded after the 6 and 6, totally 12 months of the year. Then there's a cosmological design, months of the year, and at the center is Chateau de Roi, yani Sun King, Sun King's mansion, sun with the mountains around. There is a cosmological design, really a reference to medieval design and even ancient designs based upon astronomy and cosmology. There's a central axis which leads you to the city of Paris, regarded as a Baroque concept of landscape design. Same exists in this design. We have entrance piece of Versailles Palace here. This is better, maybe, entrance piece of Versailles. But the idea is that we have a great axis, landscape axis, leading to the city of Paris. You see how Baroque design penetrated to landscape design. This idea started with Renaissance, Palladios villas, later developed in Baroque period, in towns and in the landscape, in both Renaissance and Baroque. We have designs introduced to introduce order from the viewpoint of humankind. And this is explained as a totally new understanding of human-nature relationship. Baroque axis is this concept. You should never forget about it. Baroque axis introduced to shape the environment after a geometrical order. Right. What happened to this palace? It became demolished, unfortunately, by the mob during French Revolution. They attacked this palace and entirely demolished it. It was one of the wonders of the world, created by Louis XIV. Unfortunately ended. Chateau de Marly designs, credits after drawings. Here we have on the right. Architect is Jules Arduin Mansart and painter Charles Brun, as I told you before. Here it is. You can see the pool in front of the king's chateau. The decor of the Pavilion du Roi featured Apollo, the Sun King's iconographic persona. King regarded himself sun, and his persona symbolized by Apollo. Other pavilions were dedicated to other Olympians, but also to Hercules and to victory, fame, and abundance. And also they belonged to the members of the royal family. Yeah. Then we also have a mythological design here. Cosmology, and astronomy, and mythology all together worked as pieces of design concept to realize this great palace. 17th century. And the landscape design in relation to this Baroque axis from original. This is an original painting. This is, I suppose, a reconstruction of it, and an original painting again from 17th century. And they also introduced squares within the city of Paris. Jules Arduin Mansart designed Place des Victoires. Place des Victoires. This is the original design. We have a square avenues radiate from the square, again after a geometrical order, spikes of a wheel based upon polygons, typical of Baroque urban design. Same goes for Borromini's Santivo, değil mi? Two intersecting triangles. You can imagine here again a geometrical form with the corners giving us the avenues. Actually, we have here a geometrical Euclidean order imposed to the city with this design. Let me tell you that the colony cities in Americas, in Far East, in Australia, all based upon this understanding of Renaissance and Baroque planning. At the background, you can find grid order of Hippodamus, 5th century, ancient Greece, and its towns, colonies, where we have a great historical center with temples and radiating roads leading to domestic places. But we don't have maybe this sort of specific squares in this plan, this grid order. This specific squares introduced in Baroque planning and later spread to the colonies. When you go today to New York, to Montreal, to Quebec City, to, I don't know, Toronto, Chicago, any other city in America, you find the same planning. Then this is, you should never forget, Baroque based upon earlier grid pattern of Hippodamus. There's a local European history for this kind of urban planning. Or times also sometimes named modern Baroque or postmodern Baroque. Best example could be this Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart by Ben van Berkel. You know, classicism of modernity gradually replaced by these Baroque forms and designs based upon organic elements. Dominated now designs like this or that. Sorry, that. Andralev Center, Baku, Zaha Hadid. It looks like a mountain or kind of organic piece from nature. Or interior with surprises, paths, indefinite, surprising corners and spaces at the background, which is not part of a dominating central unit. I mean, spreads like pieces of organic developments, like branches of a tree. But let me tell you that in Baroque design, we have really a geometric order based upon Euclidean geometry. Baroque plasticity is also there. But in modern Baroque, we have Baroque plasticity for sure. Baroque plasticity, undulating forms, ovals and so forth. But we also have a different kind of geometry. But we name it fractal geometry. Fractal. Geometry based upon organic, natural forms discovered by means of technologically developed instruments like microscope and others. I mean, today's geometry is more organic than, than the earlier Euclidean geometry. Euclidean geometry is a geometry which is a clean product of human mind. I mean, an ideal geometry. It's not a geometry directly in nature. It's a geometry imposed on nature. Of course, our brain is a part of nature, but sometimes it fails, yani. Yeah. Sometimes we are far from nature. I don't know. This is another discussion that needs to be done in another course. At the moment, I can say so that today's geometry is different than the geometry in Baroque, original Baroque, but today's Baroque employs same organic forms, undulating forms, plasticity. But the hidden background geometry is different. I hope I have been able to explain myself very well. Or not very well, well. And Zaha Hadid, late architect Zaha Hadid, one of the greatest architects of our age. Unfortunately, we lost her to the memory of Zaha Hadid. Oh, it's a good idea. I can dedicate this lecture series to the memory of Zaha Hadid. It's a good idea. I like him very much. Sorry. I like her very much. Her works are extraordinary, really. I can introduce some further buildings inspired by history. I don't know whether it is a place to do it, but nice similarities. You know, Barcelona Pavilion by Mies, almost totally based upon Japanese architecture, which was, you know, in the beginning of the 20th century, a central origin for the art of painting and industrial design. Architects also employed it widely. Or Wright's Robbie House in Chicago, his prayer style based upon Oriental designs like Turkish, you know, Fountain of Sultanahmet, which was taken as its model was taken to an exposition in Chicago, which took place in 1893, and Wright visited this exposition. We know this; it is historically proven, and inspired by these great Eves, Turkish. The book I send you, Le Corbusier's book, is nice to read on how modern architects inspired from traditional architecture of the Middle East. Thank you for today. We will be going on next week. I will have another lecture next week. Let me open you to see yours. I don't see you, but at least I can have your pictures. Stop sharing them now first. Okay, next week I will be teaching on 18th century Ottoman architecture. You should also know it before going to 19th century developments in the next semester. Then next week will be our last lecture. Hope to see you next week. Any questions, anything you would like to say and share? If not, I would like to finalize today's lecture. Thank you Orçun, Nesrin, çok teşekkürler.
Biz teşekkür ederiz.
Herkese iyi çalışmalar, başarılar. Görüşürüz inşallah haftaya. Bye bye.
Görüşmek üzere.
Görüşürüz sevgili arkadaşlar.
Görüşürüz Nesrin. Erken. Görüşürüz arkadaşlar.